Hi everyone, my name is Adam GSE and welcome back to my channel. The Eurovision season of 2025 is now finally over, and even though I always intended to do a debrief after the contest, I now feel like I have a lot more to express than I originally intended. Today I will unpack my experiences of watching all three shows during the week, discuss any surprises that unfolded for me, both song and performance wise, and of course dive deep into the overall results. Before I begin with this video, make sure you give this video a like, subscribe to my channel, and feel free to leave a comment down below. Firstly, I will start things off nice and easy and discuss the shows themselves. The shows overall were so much fun to witness, and based on how much I've been invested in Eurovision in this particular year, this is easily the most hyped I've been for Eurovision week, apart from 2023 of course. St. Jacob's Halle is an excellent arena to host a contest, as the stage design is fantastic. Not only does the staging give plenty of room for the artists to move around, there are also so many options to place various graphics on the LEDs. There's of course the backstage and the floor LEDs, but there's also a giant frame at the front of the stage that looks very cool. The LED mountains at the side of the stage seems like a very nice addition to blend in with the Swiss culture. Even though this year's hosts did a pretty good job, they aren't really the most memorable range of hosts I've witnessed, especially in recent years. However, I will definitely give Hazel credit for trying to implement some sort of humour throughout various parts of the three shows. Unless the humour ends up coming across as cringeworthy, which is thankfully not the case this year. It's always nice to witness nevertheless. I'll get into what I thought of the semi-qualifiers later, but this year we saw a change in the way this year's qualifiers were announced. Instead of announcing the qualifiers in a completely random order, we see three countries on our screen, and one of them will be chosen to qualify for the grand final. I know a load of people were skeptical about this change when it was announced, but I actually did not mind it from the very beginning, as it felt like an effective way to bring out more suspense for the viewers without changing the formats of the qualification process. They also stated that it's not as complicated as the change they tried to bring out in 2023, which thankfully did not work. So seeing a change as small as this did manage to take a fresh approach on the qualification system in a more positive spin. You'll see what I mean when I speak about my thoughts on the qualifiers. But for now, I'm going to discuss some of my favourite performances. Out of all of the performances, there are 8 countries that stood out to me the most. They were mostly ones I was expecting to deliver, but there are still quite a few big surprises. I might as well get Finland out of the way because it is my favourite entry of the year. I had a feeling that Erika Wigman would give her all on stage, but she definitely made her staging in Basel 10 times bigger than what she brought in UMK. And I'm still blown away by her stage presence, as she easily presents herself as one of the most confident performers out of this year's acts. Austria was another performance that stood out to me, and even though it wasn't really as sharp nor dramatic as I would have hoped, it was still executed in a very powerful way. The staging still perfectly correlates to themes of Wasted Love, particularly with the amount of boat props incorporated in it. JJ's live vocals were also outstanding, which heavily contributed to the spectacle they tried to create on stage. Even though Lithuania's performance was very similar to what we've seen before, Qatar's still absolutely blew their staging through the roof, especially on such a wider scale. It just made Tavo Keys sound 1,000 times more atmospheric, and not only did it leave me completely astounded, it also made me slightly emotional at times. You just know that songs like these were made for the big stage. During the week there was so much hype for Belgium staging, and honestly, the hype was absolutely worth it. Not only did Red Sebastian's performance perfectly align with the tone of strobe lights, it was also choreographed so well, especially with the red aesthetic on the LEDs and the backup dancers that appeared to be clones of Red Sebastian. It looked absolutely slick, and it immediately gives you the feel of being in an underground club. Sweden was incredibly fun as per usual, and even though it's not too different from its Melfest counterparts, there are still a few very nice additional touches to upgrade the staging to a much wider scale. The addition of the fir trees was useful to immerse the audience into the sauna setting. The rainbow coloured lasers at the end invited us to party along with Kai. And most importantly, even the sausage had a bigger upgrade. Albania has also upped their A game in terms of staging. But at the same time, they still kept the spirit of their Festival of Kangas performance, which honestly has been executed in the best way possible. Skodra Electronica staging is so creative in terms of how the space is laid out, especially with the electronic drum kit and the LEDs, which perfectly contrast between the red and black graphics, representing Beatrice and Cole's position within the stage. There are two other performances I loved, both of which are complete surprises. So I'll start off with the most impressive one, which is Switzerland. There have been quite a few one-take performances we've seen in recent years, but this takes that approach to a whole new level. While Zoe May's vocals are completely soft, I love how the performance concentrates on her and her alone. No use of LEDs, no use of props, just her and a completely blank space with incredible use of lighting that easily makes this one of the most uniquely emotional performances we've ever seen in the contest. And I really hope we get plenty of similar performances in the future. France is another country that uses staging to sell their entries even further, and they definitely did this with Maman. Just like with Zoe May's performance, there is just a blank space without any use of LED. The difference is that Luan does have a playing field in terms of how her performance is staged, which is incorporated by the use of sand. And no, not the Denmark 2024 kind. The sand techniques perfectly symbolizes the passage of time to express how much Luan has grown after years of losing her mother, which makes this such a delicate performance. Germany also had an incredibly fun playing field in terms of its staging. There is a huge structured pillar built alongside a large margin of the stage, which has been used to a great advantage. It gives Aber his own personal space to play his violin, whilst we mainly concentrate on Tina moving around various parts of the structure, providing a great impression of establishing Balor into a club-like setting, which is what this song is absolutely made for. Even though Tina wasn't vocally perfect, at least she was well enough to perform it to an extent. Although I did completely rule Luxembourg out in my semi-2 predictions, my mind was completely changed when I saw the performance. Not only did it manage to incorporate similar elements to Laura Thorne's national final performance, but it also expanded the concept to a grander scale, especially with the LED of the dollhouse. I also love the opening shot where we open through a keyhole with Laura sitting on a chair on the LED floor, which I thought was so clever. Plus, Laura actually sang incredibly well, which immediately threw my doubts of Le Pupi Monteson's chances right out the window. Latvia was another entry where its staging made me feel more intrigued about how well it would do. And how Tomatoes literally gave it their all to showcase their artistry on stage. The combination of Latvian folk and elements of modern music perfectly aligns with their staging presence. Their spectacular costume design and the use of the LED curtain also upgraded their performance to a whole new level, which made me obtain so much more respect for them as performers. Before moving on to the semi-final qualifiers, I'm going to briefly discuss some of the interval acts that were showcased throughout the two shows. Firstly, I'm going to talk about the Made in Switzerland interval in semi-final 1. On paper, it kind of felt like the Swiss equivalent of the Swedish smorgasbord interval act, but this did a pretty good job at debunking stereotypes of Swiss culture, and for showcasing various things that we wouldn't have known were Swiss in the first place. It's also a really nice opportunity to showcase that Switzerland were the founders of the Eurovision Song Contest, which was well incorporated in the second half of the number, although the non-political bit may be up for discussion. However, it feels like there is one thing that is missing from it, considering that we're so used to seeing these types of interval acts when Eurovision is hosted in Sweden. It doesn't really feel the same without Petra Mede doing a... Oh yeah, Petra Mede does make an appearance at some stage, which is pretty cool, I guess. Overall, this was a pretty good interval for what it is. Also in semi-final 1, we saw an interval act that was dedicated to Celine Dion's Eurovision entry, Ne partis pas sans moi. Celine Dion was heavily rumoured to make an appearance in Eurovision this year, considering how famous she was after winning the 1998 contest. Although I wasn't really too convinced about it, I really hoped that the interval did not end up like the lazy attempt of an ABBA tribute that we got last year. I love ABBA as much as the next person, but that interval act looked like an absolute mess on TV. At least with this year's Celine Dion interval act, we actually got a video message from Celine Dion herself, which was so lovely to witness. Eventually, her Eurovision winning song was covered by 4 artists who competed in Eurovision last year: Iolanda, Jerry Hale, Sylvester Belts, and Marina Sati. And honestly, this is such a beautiful rendition of it. It felt fresh and authentic. You could tell that it tried to recapture the feeling of the original song, and it was translated really well on the TV. One more interval act I want to touch upon for now is in the second semi-final. And of course, this is the one that involves some of the 2021 artists performing their entries they would have performed during the 2020 contest, which was a great concept to bring up. Although it probably would be more reasonable to let in 2020 artists who did not compete in 2021, I couldn't really think of that many who would be considered to be fan favourites at the time. The only ones that I could really think of were Ulrika from Norway, the Mamas from Sweden, and Ben Dulwich from Germany. Deodato would have been ideal as well, but he already performed Fire More as an interval act in 2022. Mamo should have at least invited the Mamas to do the same. Dodgy Freyer might have also been a fitting choice as well, since he never gotten to perform live in 2021 due to one of his band members getting COVID. Nevertheless, the artists we did get in the end were all great selections. John's Tears probably makes the most sense, as he's performing Répondez-moi in Switzerland, which was class. I'm really glad the Roop were invited, as they've sent my favourite entries in both 2020 and 2021. And it was great to see them finally perform On Fire on the Eurovision stage. Effendi might be a bit of a more random choice, but Cleopatra is still a really good song, and she did perform it well live. Destiny ended the act with All My Love. Even though it's not one of my personal favourites from that year, Destiny is extremely talented, so it was still fantastic to see her get involved. Overall, I really enjoyed this concept of bringing back a selection of songs that never saw the light of day on the Eurovision stage into one big interval act. And all the artists who were selected did a great job in performing their individual songs. Now that I've gone through my thoughts of the semi-final interval acts, I will now discuss my thoughts on the results of the 2 semi-finals. I am mostly happy about the songs that made it through, but I felt like this year in particular, there are plenty more of my favourites that didn't make it through than normal. If you want to see my initial reactions to the semi-qualifiers, I have posted videos for both semi-finals if you haven't checked them out already. Semi-final 1 had the more obvious qualifiers, as there are a lot more fan favourites performing here. But aside from those, there are still quite a few open spots that could have been given to anyone else. Firstly, I'll get the shock non-qualifier out of the way, as I was really disappointed about Belgium and queuing. Due to the high quality of strobe lights, both as a song and as a performance, I was so convinced they had a chance this year after Musty NQ'd for them last year. Whilst Musty more so failed to qualify due to his weak staging and his live vocals, Brett Sebastian upgraded both of these aspects when he performed in semi-final 1. Yet, he still managed to place 1 position lower than Musty in the semi-final results. Maybe it's because locals weren't so keen on the song? Maybe Red Sebastian was slotted to perform after Kyle Alessandro at the beginning of the second half, with both Marco Bosniak and Theo Evan performing at the end of the semi? Who knows at this point? On a more positive note, there are two specific surprises that made me really happy. The first of which is Iceland. I was very 50-50 on whether I will place Roa into my top 10 qualifying predictions. I ultimately decided not to, as it was performing first in the semi-final, and I have concerns that the energy might not translate as well for casual viewers. However, Five managed to keep the staging from Son Verkepnen and brought the energy to a completely new level to Basel. As it turns out, it was enough for them to qualify, and I'm absolutely thrilled, as they are such lovely lads from following other social media content throughout the season, and Roa is such a fun banger. The other nice surprise, which is slightly more surprising, is San Marino. I knew there was an opportunity where internationally famous DJs could qualify for the final in Eurovision, and all it took was Gabri Ponte performing the theme tune to San Remo, out of all things. In one of my previous videos, I said that Gabri Ponte comes across as incredibly charismatic whenever he performs. Fortunately, it was enough for him to get into the final, and it was honestly deserved, as his performance translated really well on TV. The main surprise qualifier of the night, for pretty much all of us, is Portugal. I can understand that Desicado had a bit of a cult following with a certain amount of fans, and because of this, as well as its message of course, I can now see why they made the final. Even though I thought this song was decent before the contest, I never really got myself to pay attention to the song or anything in the performance that could make it stand out. However, watching this performance back after the semi-final, the staging resonates really well with the chill vibes of the song, as well as its core message. And Napa did a really good job of bringing that across on stage. Moving on to semi-final 2, and this was the one that was sort of more unpredictable in terms of which songs were completely safe and borderline safe. Obviously the three songs we all expected to qualify, which were Austria, Finland and Israel, all made the final. But I'm low-key happy with the rest of the countries that qualified alongside them. I am mostly thrilled with two specific countries, which were Denmark and Lithuania. When confirming my predictions, I was confident enough about Denmark making the final for the first time since 2019. Even though I had some doubts about it, mainly due to the way I changed up my predictions on the day, I am so over the moon that Sissel managed to bring Denmark back into the final with such an iconic banger. Lithuania may be slightly more predictable qualification wise, but there still might have been a chance that certain people might not get it. Ultimately, Lithuania were the first country to qualify out of its semi-final, and they absolutely deserve it for how atmospheric and epic it sounds as a hard alternative rock ballad. There are other countries that have upgraded for me due to their stagings that also safely qualified, particularly Latvia and Luxembourg, and I'm really happy both of those countries made it for that specific reason. The one country I was very shocked about qualifying was Armenia. There were a couple of people I knew who did expect locals to pick this up, and I have to say, they were definitely right. Apparently the staging is also really cool, as Park managed to put on a show with him running on the treadmill, which definitely suited the vibe of the song. And his vocals were actually really good. I had a feeling that he would put on a good performance, but I mainly wrote it off completely because I wouldn't think a general audience would think this song is strong enough to make the final. At the end of the day, it's still a really good bop. So this kind of had every right to qualify. Unfortunately, Ireland had failed to make it to the final. And as disappointing as it is, mainly because of how ambitious I was for us to qualify for 2 years in a row, I expected it to happen in the end. That being said, I'm still incredibly proud of Emmy and her team for their performance, as I thought it suited the song well. Although I wanted more out of it, everyone did the best that they could. And I'm just really happy that we managed to send a bop like this to Eurovision. We can always try something new and different for next year, I guess. However, I was very shocked about both Australia and Czechia not making it. Australia was a very televote friendly song, so it was a shame to see them not qualify for the final for 2 years in a row. The concept of the performance was fantastic, but I felt like it wasn't as chaotic enough to fit in with the whole nature of Milkshake Man. I also felt that its chances were killed even further from performing first in the semi-final. But they were still very close, at least. Czechia makes more sense, as even though it was popular when it came out, it's not everyone's cup of tea. And as much as I love Kiss Kiss Goodbye, I can live with this not being in the final. Now to move on to the grand final. And before I dive deep into the results, I am going to discuss the running order. I thought that the songs that were allocated in each half were very appropriate overall, and I love how spread out each of the genres are throughout the lineup. Norway was a very surprising opener, but it still felt like a great way to open up the show. Luxembourg was the country that I thought was most likely to open the show, but it still managed to perform in second. Estonia performing in third surprised me quite a lot, as it feels a bit too quirky to say for the beginning of the show. But at least loads of people still managed to pick up on it. A random little fact about this year's running order is that this is the second year in a row where Israel, Lithuania and Spain are sandwiched together performing back to back. From performing first in their semi-final, I am really happy that Iceland are performing late enough within the first half, as a way to give them an even further chance to stand out. I am also thrilled with the big favourites performing later on in the first half, such as Austria, the Netherlands, and best of all, Finland closing the first half, just like they did in 2023 with Karja. The start of the second half was a bit more random, as there are songs that I would have assumed to perform much later on, such as Poland and Germany. Regardless, the final 5 performing songs felt strong enough to end the grand final in a show-stopping way. Denmark definitely felt appropriate being near the end, as a way to welcome them back into the final after so many years of staying in the semis. 2 big fan favourites, Sweden and France, both had amazing spots near the end. Additionally, both San Marino and Albania felt like appropriate closers to end the show with a bang. Particularly with Albania, it definitely goes to show that an entry closing the grand final can actually do it justice if it's strong enough. Whilst the grand final itself was absolutely phenomenal as a whole, this has to be, without a doubt, the most stressful results process I've ever witnessed in Eurovision history. I haven't posted any reactions, but I do very frequently appear in Eurovision's reaction to the grand final results, so I would definitely recommend you check that video out and subscribe to our channel. Firstly, I would like to start off by saying huge congratulations to Austria for winning the contest. Wasted Love is a complete game changer of a song that will most certainly benefit the quality of the songs we'll be likely to see in the future of the contest. I honestly could not think of a more deserving winner. Now to address the elephant in the room, which is Israel. I normally wouldn't get into this sort of territory whenever I make videos about Eurovision, but since Israel has had a huge impact on this year's results, I want to take a bit of time to address my thoughts in the most concise way possible. Not only did Israel finish in second place, but it also won the public vote. Although I was a bit suspicious about their jury score. Heck, even Azerbaijan managed to give them 12 points. But if any country were to give them 12 jury points, Azerbaijan will be the one country I would most expect. It still managed to finish quite low with them. In regards to the public votes, I am honestly not surprised that they scored this high, as it was very similar to what they scored with the public last year. And it wasn't even the main thing that made me feel uncomfortable about them potentially winning. The main reason why I was so stressed in particular is because of how split the jury and the televote were with all the big songs. Like, all the big jury songs scored very low with the public, and even the big televote bait songs didn't score as highly as I would presume. Going back to Israel for a moment, I personally don't like New Day Will Rise as a song. But at the same time, I can understand that there is an audience for the song, which is completely fine by me. However, there is a much bigger problem that has had a massive effect on its high score. The Israeli government has aided them to rig the televotes in various methods, such as spending money on paid advertisements specifically telling viewers to vote for them, which can be seen on quite a few social platforms, specifically YouTube, as well as hacking SIM cards to get other countries, especially those who are pro-Palestinian, to vote for Israel as many times as possible. To sum up these feelings in the most straightforward way possible, what Israel are doing in the contest is wrong. They are clearly breaking the rules for propaganda purposes. It's not fair on all the other countries who put in so much effort to showcase their performers to a global audience. And if Israel do manage to win under these circumstances, it could damage Eurovision in the worst way possible. I'm aware that it is very tricky to kick Israel out, as its broadcaster has direct ties with the EBU, which is something that Russia didn't have when they got kicked out in the contest in 2022. The EBU has also recently announced that they are planning to have discussions with all the other delegations regarding Israel's participation, and hopefully this leads to something promising. If that's not the case, and I really hope we don't end up in this situation again, I really hope the EBU tries to set some regulations about influencing the vote in such a manner so that it completely prevents Israel from having such a huge influence in the overall votes. I also want to add, from an Irish perspective, that even though we are one of the most pro-Palestine countries in the world, or in this case Europe, we still managed to give Israel 7 jury points. I have absolutely no idea what some of our jurors were thinking during then, as it really pisses me off to see that us out of all countries would even have a small impact on Israel's overall score. I know that we still gave them 10 points from the televotes, but I don't believe the majority of those votes were genuine. Very swiftly moving on to discuss the rest of the results. Out of all the karaoke songs that competed this year, I am very shocked to see that Estonia managed to come highest, finishing in 3rd place. I still like Espresso Macchiato as a song, but I felt like the performance was way too on the nose for my liking, and Tommy Cash as a person also puts me off. I was not surprised to see this receive a high televote score, but for this to come top 10 with the juries was so unexpected, as it is usually the kind of quirky songs that the juries would completely mark down. I will say that the skit where a random person joins Tommy Cash on stage with the security guards preventing her from doing so was actually quite genius. Alongside this, Sweden came 4th, which is respectful enough, as we all knew it would manage to come top 5. But I still would have liked to seen it place a little bit higher. Maybe 2nd or 3rd would be more reasonable. As for the rest of the top 10, Italy coming 5th surprised me the most, as Volevo, Essere and Duro never really seemed to get as hyped up as Italy would normally get in general, but I can respect it at the same time, as Lucio Corsi seemed to perform very well, and the minimal staging was probably effective enough for him to receive plenty of jury love. Greece was also a surprise for a top 10 placing, but there is still a good bit of hype for Astromata in general, so I'm happy that it is here. Due to the hype that Albania have been getting this year, I really hoped they would place in the top 10. But there is another part of me that says that it could just about place outside of the top 10, as there has been some particular fan favourites in this sort of vein that never really fares well in the top 10. Thankfully, they managed to finish in 8th place, and that's mainly thanks to their overwhelmingly high televote score. And I honestly could not be more happier for Skodra Electronica, as they very easily deserved it. I will also have to give Switzerland a mention, because I'm absolutely delighted that Voyage managed to finish within the top 10. However, 0 points from the public, completely undeserved, especially with a performance that has been executed so well. I really wanted Finland to place within the top 10, but Erika Vikman unfortunately just missed out, placing 11th, which makes me really sad, as she literally gave it her all in her performance for Ikoma, and she honestly deserved at least a place within the top 10. On a more positive note, there are other countries that I am really impressed about receiving higher places than I initially thought. The first of which is Germany. Even though Balor received quite a lot of hype when it was selected, I was a slight bit concerned that it may be placed within the bottom 5, just based on the fact that it was an automatic qualifier, as we've previously seen with other big 5 bops that has received the same fate, particularly with Belen in 2022. Tina also had to deal with laryngitis throughout the majority of the season, and even though it was a bit worrying, fortunately it seems like she recovered well enough before performing in Basel. Not only did they manage to place 15th, they also did equally as well with both the public and the jury votes. And I'm so incredibly happy that Balor managed to give Germany another decent result after sticking around in the bottom 2 after so many attempts in recent years. And I really hope that this will influence Germany's selection process for the better. Latvia was another entry that I was pleasantly surprised about. I kind of knew there would be a high appeal for Berman Laimi based on how it was staged and performed, but I did not think the appeal would be this high. They did extremely well with the juries, and they also did quite well with the public too, which is definitely a good sign if Latvia want to boost up their qualification streak in future editions. Additionally, they also finished 2nd in their semi-final, so it was really nice to see that they've qualified with pure ease. I had a feeling that both Poland and Ukraine would do well with the public, respectfully due to Poland's huge diaspora in Europe, and for the overall support for Ukraine in general. And their respective overall placings is what I would have initially predicted, so I am proud of both countries doing as well as they did. When Lithuania qualified, I was feeling pretty uncertain on how well they will do in the final, but 16th is such an incredible placing for songs like Tavo Akis. So I'm incredibly proud for the efforts that Katarsis made performing on stage. I really hope the United Kingdom would have placed higher than 19th. I really respect that the juries managed to place them within the top 10, but yet again, they managed to score 0 points with the public for the 3rd time this decade, which is a huge shame for them. Even though Spain didn't finish last in the final, I knew it would have been the lowest placing Big 5 entry this year, as it did eventually manage to finish within the bottom 3. Although there were other songs in the bottom 5 that I would have liked to see place higher, like Denmark, Iceland and San Marino, but none of these songs were that likely to qualify anyway, so their respective placings make sense. Now I'm going to go back a bit and discuss some of the interval acts we saw in the grand final. And I have to say, this is a huge step up from last year, as even though they may seem like interval acts we would expect to see in the grand final, the way they were announced and performed were completely different. Being hosted in Switzerland, it was very nice to give some of the former artists, both old and new, a chance to perform their Eurovision entries once again on a wider scale than they would have previously performed it when representing their country in Eurovision. I would doubt most people my age would know the likes of Cinema by Paloa, or even the 4-time representatives Peter, Sue and Mark, but they were still very nice additions to target some of the older generations. Afterwards, we got to see Luca Hani perform a very slick dance routine to She Got Me, as well as John Steers making a 2nd appearance in this year's interval acts. This time performing his song that he actually performed in Eurovision, to L'Univers. Honestly, I don't care what John Steers ends up singing. At least bringing him back to perform in Switzerland in any shape or form is amazing in itself. Another Swiss act who had their own interval act was of course the previous year's winner, Nemo, who gave us a surprisingly mind-blowing performance of their new song, Unexplainable. Their other recent song, Casanova, would have also been great to see on the show, but I feel like this is more fitting from a Eurovision perspective. And it feels like a more personal song towards Nemo. And they absolutely killed it. It was also really nice to see a segment at the beginning of the show where they delivered the Eurovision trophy and made a little joke to prevent Nemo from breaking it again. Followed by them performing the code one last time. Obviously, I'm saving the best one for last, and you obviously all know what I'm talking about. It is of course the interval act with 2 iconic runners-up, Baby Lasagna and Carrier. I love how the staging is set as a video game duel as a way to determine who had the better song. Baby Lasagna goes on to sing Rim Tim Taki Tim, and Carrier sings Cha Cha Cha. And the way the 2 songs are mashed up together feels like witnessing a universal experience. They then performed their new collab, Eurodab, together, which is an incredibly fun banger, and they both set the stage on fire, making it one of the greatest interval acts I've ever witnessed. This is definitely one to remember. Also, bonus points to Karia for finally bringing Europapa into the grand final. Europapa! To sum up my overall feelings of this year's contest, I feel like I'm becoming way more of a passionate Eurovision fan as the years go by. And this has definitely been proven by how hyped I was for Eurovision in this particular year. With the strong variety of song quality and the experiences I've been through over the past few months. Despite how much I enjoyed the shows, I've also never felt more concerned about the future of the contest, especially after those results. Eurovision's probably played the biggest role in shaping up so many things in my life for the better, especially with all the incredible friendships I made within the Eurovision community alone. And to imagine a scenario where the contest suddenly crashes down, especially due to a result that could have easily happened this year, will be deeply upsetting for me. We cannot allow a similar scenario happening every year if we want the contest to survive. So the EBU need to step up to stabilize the true foundation of Eurovision that is rooted with love, diversity, and unity, without any outside influences that promotes any form of hate or discrimination. But for now, it will be interesting to see how long Eurovision will last. And I'm willing to enjoy and cherish every single moment of it. Anyway, this is where I end the video. And if you have made it this far, I want to thank each and every one of you for tuning into my content over the past few months. And especially for this video, as I put in so much effort into it to conclude this year's Eurovision season. Maybe I'll get to create more engaging Eurovision content over the next season. Who knows? Maybe I might also do some off-season projects if the ideas come around. If you have any suggestions on what type of videos I should make, leave it in the comments down below. And make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to my channel. Once again, I could not thank you enough for watching my videos for this year's Eurovision season, as this was such a fun little project to do, and hopefully it might lead up to something bigger. Take care everyone, and whenever I release more content, I will see you next time. Goodbye!